All right. So you're thinking about taking the BA certification. Here's a few quick tips of things you absolutely need to know in order to ensure that you have a chance at passing that exam, because it is tough. I did pass it on the first try, but it wasn't without its share of some serious anxiety. So here's a few tips and some things that I wish I could have done better um, in order to prepare for the test. First, memorize the knowledge areas. I'm not a memorizer. In school, I was always all about the concepts. If I understood the concept, then the facts will just fall into place and I didn't need to memorize. Probably not going to work out so well on this test, mostly because the BABOK guide has a lot of very specific terms that seem very similar to other terms. So without memorizing all the different versions of that term to know exactly what they mean in that situation, you're going to miss a lot of questions. So you've got to memorize the knowledge areas. And memorizing the knowledge areas is like, a stepped approach. First, you have to know all the six BA knowledge areas. Then you have to be able to break down all of those six BA knowledge areas into their individual tasks. And then you have to break down all of those tasks into their individual inputs, elements, outputs, and techniques. When I studied, I did not focus that much on inputs because I thought I'd be able to just get it and figure it out, but I was wrong. You need to memorize the inputs, the elements, the outputs, and the techniques. The techniques can be a little tricky because so many techniques can apply to so many different knowledge areas and tasks. So what I recommend is going through each and every one of the techniques and really understand how to use it. Not just the definition of what it is, but like try it out. Like if you try it out, it'll make sense to you what it's for, and if you really understand all the different knowledge areas, it'll just fuse together and make sense, and you'll be able to get those questions right. The competencies. I would say that the competencies were the easiest part, only because it's not that confusing. The competencies are just generalized skills, right? So analytical thinking, interaction skills, the types of things that any person in almost any profession will come across. So most people are pretty familiar with those things. So I wouldn't spend a ton of time on those other than just knowing what they are and all the different categories within each competency. Next, it's about practicing. I most certainly would have failed the test if I did not have practice tests to help me along. I actually used the CBAP guide, which I'll include a link for. I have it on the blog page, and I'll make sure you guys can get to it. But the CBAP practice test has 4 different practice tests, each with 50 questions, as well as a practice test per chapter of the IIBA, or their actual guide, which kind of more or less lines up with the IIBA guide. When I studied, I did not ever check my answers. That way every time I took a test, no matter how I did, I never was for sure which ones I got right and which ones I got wrong. So as I kept on studying, I would see myself getting better scores, and I could also continue using the tests over and over and over again. Along with the tests, I also used flashcards, and I used the flashcards to do the memorization that I talked about earlier with the different knowledge areas. And I started general, and then I got more specific. So first I started with just a few flashcards with foundational concepts like the 6 BA knowledge areas, the competencies, and a few of the high-level definitions like, a solution requirement, a business requirement, a stakeholder requirement, all the chapter 1 stuff, essentially. And then I dug into each one of the sections, so then I'd have a flashcard that says, what are all the inputs to this task? What are all the elements to this task? And like I said, I didn't focus so much on the inputs as I should have, but hey, it is what it is. The test is over with, and I'm done with it. And yeah. And finally, study the definitions. Oh yeah, the definitions. You gotta study the definitions. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them aren't exactly what you think they are, which is why it's important to study the definitions in a flashcard type of manner, because The definition for a stakeholder requirement and the definition for a business requirement might sound very similar, but when you could differentiate the two, then those are two questions you'll probably get right on the test that you may have, gotten confused over. And it can be way more confusing than you would think. So make sure you know all the differences. Make the flashcards, study them on your lunch break, whatever you got to do, just do it. I use Study Blue, which is awesome because you can create the flashcards. You can study from your phone, you can study from your laptop, you can study from your iPad or whatever. So they have apps for it. You can do it online. It's perfect. And those are really all my tips.